Hello everybody, this is Gary Sr. at the Race Club in Coronado, wishing all of you the happiest holiday this year and hopefully a healthy and happy new year as we go into the new year of 2022. We're going to end this year with this last live YouTube show with a very special presentation we think you'll enjoy on mental training, which is really important as we come into the final season championship meets for many of you that are swim or already swum. I'm sorry if we missed you on that, but we feel this is an important part of how you perform well in your championship meets. And before we get into the subject of mental training, just want to say a couple of things. First of all, thanks to all of our subscribers who have joined and subscribed to our YouTube channel as members. Again, we will share with you once or twice a month a special video that we produced that you'll have exclusive rights to see. And so for that, we thank you for joining, and hopefully you're enjoying those videos that we send you. For those that are subscribers that aren't members yet, we hope that you'll consider joining at a very reasonable monthly fee. We will provide you with a great video every month, or possibly two videos. So please join us if you can. Now we're going to talk about mental training. We make this a very focal point of our camps. Every camp, which is a 4-day camp, on the final morning of the camp, we spend at least an hour, sometimes longer, talking about the importance of mental training. Mental training is one of the 5 disciplines required to become the best that you can be in swimming. And what are the other 4? Well, there's swimming training, which is very important, obviously. There's mental training. There is strength training, which is really dry land, incorporating not just strength training, but stretching as well. Then there's nutrition, which we feel is a very important topic. And there's recovery, which is often neglected in the training program. But today we're going to talk about arguably the most important of the 5 disciplines, which is the mental training. When I swam many years ago, there was a great swimmer named Mark Spitz who won 7 Olympic gold medals in Munich when I was there with him. We were roommates there. And that record stood until Michael Phelps broke it in Beijing in 2008. A record that I think may have never been broken, except they added more events, which made it a little bit easier, more relays. So it's a little bit less. No, I won't say that. It's always a challenge to win that many medals in Olympics. But Mark Spitz used to tell me, he said, when you get to the championship meet and you're standing on those blocks, everybody's worked hard. Everybody's, worked their tails off to be ready physically. They're strong, they're capable, some perhaps more talented than others. But he said what it boils down to is who's the mentally toughest swimmer that's going to win that race. He said at that point it becomes, the winner becomes almost 95% mental. I'm not sure if it's all that much, but the brain is so powerful, it's so compelling, it really has the power to either enable you to swim above and beyond what you're capable of, or it has the ability to stop you or inhibit you or prevent you from reaching your goals. And I see a lot of that happen. I see a lot of talented swimmers who become their worst enemy. And in some cases, it's the most intelligent of the swimmers that are the worst offenders. They overthink everything, or they think of, there's a million reasons why you can not perform well, but it's important to never let one of those thoughts enter your mind during or preceding the competition. That's easier said than done. So what I see so many swimmers doing, and I always make this analogy, it's as if you have a dog and you take your dog on a walk. You have a choice of either letting your dog run, which most people don't, because if they're like my dog, who's a hunting dog, he'll go after every bird or every dog that he sees. And so you have to keep that dog on a tight leash, which I do. And your mind is kind of like that with your body. You can either keep your body on a tight leash and not let it run, or you can let it go and you can let it run and be uninhibited in how fast it can swim. So that's what we try to teach our campers. And on the 5th day of every camp, we have a discussion on mental training, and we've broken it down into 5 components. So I want to go through those 5. We won't spend as much time as we do in the camp on each of the 5 parts of mental training. But what we're trying to do basically, and Eddie Reese, the great coach at University of Texas, whom I admire so much, arguably, at least historically, the greatest and most successful swimming coach of all time, he would grade all of his swimmers. I don't know if he still does this, but at one point when my son was attending University of Texas, he would grade the swimmers on what he called the killer instinct scale. And it's a great scale because it's hard to determine exactly where a swimmer is on that scale, 0 being the worst, 10 being the toughest. But he would wait till their end of their freshman year. And remember, in college, your freshman year, your first year in college is dramatically different than what you've been doing before. And he often felt that those first year swimmers coming in, swimming against, juniors, seniors at the NC2A D1 level in a very tough environment, would determine how mentally tough they were, if they were able to adapt to the Texas routine or training from whatever they were used to doing, and they could stand up on the block at the end of that season and perform well, uninhibited by or unintimidated by the older and more, perhaps even more talented or more experienced swimmers. That would determine to him how tough they were. And so he didn't base it on how fast they went in practice or how well they swam in test meets or dual meets leading up to the championships. He basically waited till the conference championships, the NC2As, and then he could determine how mentally tough they were. So the real question is, a lot of coaches think, well, my swimmers are born with a killer instinct of whatever level it is on that scale, and it's not going to change. They either have that killer instinct or they don't. We don't believe that. We believe that you can improve your killer instinct and go up on that scale. And I'm going to tell you how to do it with your swimmers. And it's really important that they follow all 5 steps. The first step, which doesn't begin at the end of the season, it begins at the beginning of each season, is the importance of goal setting. We believe strongly at the Race Club in setting goals. And it's not just the goals that you want to achieve at the end of the season, which we call the midterm goals. We feel there's 3 different sets of goals that are all important. The first one is, what am I going to achieve today to make me a better swimmer? Not this week, not tomorrow. It's today. What can I do today to become a better swimmer? And you have to focus on something often different every day in order to achieve what you want to achieve. You can't just always think of the same thing every day or the same goal every day. So some days we work on kicking, some days we work on technique, some days we work on aerobic training, some days we work on anaerobic threshold, some days power, speed, strength training, but every day it's a little different focus, maybe a different stroke. So you have to start with that every day. What is it today I want to really try to get better at? The second is what I call the mid-range goals, and those are, what am I going to do this season? Now, we feel it's important not just to know what you want to do at the end of the season in your championship meet, but to define where you're going to do it, exactly when you're going to do it, and what you're going to do. And all 3 of those have to be determined and written down. There have been studies showing that if you write those goals down, you're actually much more successful at achieving those goals than if you just think about them. So we have all of our swimmers write down their goal times for whatever events they think they might swim at a championship meet at the end of the season. And then they put them on a poster board and put them up in their room. Every day they see those goals. You don't want to put them in, stuff them on a piece of paper, put them in your top drawer and stuff them back there where you're never going to look at them again, or even on your cell phone where you really don't pay attention, even on your home page. You put them up on the wall where you see them, or in your bathroom mirror where you see them every day. So that's step number 1, and you define where that championship is going to be. If you've never been to that pool, then Google it. Look it up online so you can see what that pool looks like. So when you get there, you feel like you've been there before, that you're familiar with it. and know what you're going to swim every day of that meet and the order in which you're going to swim it. So when you write those goal times, you put down what you're swimming on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever the day is of that meet, and you put it in that order. So the long-term goal is a little bit, to me, less emphasized by a lot of coaches, and yet I still feel it's very important. It's not one that you think about every day, but we ask our swimmers to, we don't even ask them to share it with anybody. We just want them to think about, where is this path in the sport of swimming leading them? Where do they see themselves getting to? There's a lot of work involved, and there has to be rewards at the end of this. And they have to visualize and see themselves achieving a certain level. And maybe that level is right, or maybe it's wrong. It doesn't matter, as long as they see themselves at the end of this career, or at the end of their competitive career, reaching some level in the sport. Maybe one step at a time, that's the way it happens. But how high up the ladder are they going to climb? And I think they need to have that tucked in the back of their mind, is that someday this is going to lead to this, where I become that good. And that's an important goal as well. So those 3 goals are set. Then the second part of the mental training is what we call visualization. A lot of people talk about visualization. Virtually every elite athlete practices visualization, but a lot of athletes don't. And I think they fail to realize, and many coaches do, the importance of visualization. Mike Bottom, when he was head coach of the race club, really taught me how important it was. And it was so important to him that we had 2 sessions a week in Florida when we were in Isla Mirada training. In the last Olympic Games, we trained 20 swimmers for the Olympics. We actually had more than that, but 20 actually went to Beijing for the Olympic Games in different countries. But we had 2 15-minute sessions per week where these athletes would lay on the grass on a towel under the shade of a palm tree with another towel over their face, on their backs with their hands at their side, completely relaxed. And Mike would start the watch, and he'd say, you have 15 minutes and you're going to visualize 1, 2, or 3 of your races. And it depends. Some were only swimming 1 or 2 races. They would take that time to see themselves behind the block, stepping up on the block, performing a perfect start, great reaction time, amazing underwaters, explosive breakout into their technique at the stroke rate, the breathing pattern, the turns, everything, the pulling motion, the kicking, everything through that entire race. And then they would finish seeing themselves finish the race, extending that arm or arms to the wall, touching with the head down, looking up at the scoreboard and seeing their name with their goal time next to their name. Sounds trivial. It sounds like, oh, okay, I'm going to do that, but you never do. Well, you have to carve out the time for that. It's as important to make those 2 15-minute sessions in your training every week as it is to do your 4,000 or 5,000 or 6,000 meter workout. In fact, it may be more important. Plus, you don't smell like chlorine when you get out. You don't sweat. You don't get wet, your hair wet. You can just sit there on your bed and do it. But you have to do it in some place where it's quiet. You can't be interrupted by noise or distractions. It has to be a quiet place. So we recommend that to all our swimmers, to find that place and that time, carve it out, set your alarm on your phone so that it reminds you to go to your room and visualize for 15 minutes. We do that through the whole season. In the last week, we visualize every night going into the championship meet. During the championship meet, we feel it's important only to visualize for the races of the following day. Don't even think about what's beyond the following day. You focus on the events of that next day, and then you swim them and you forget about them. That night, you focus on what's next day, and that way you take that meet one day at a time, and at the end of it, you can swim well in every single day. You can't get ahead of yourself and think about what you're going to do on the last day when you're swimming something different tomorrow. The third is what we call, the third part of the mental training is what we call confidence building. And confidence building is really important. You can't swim well at the end of the day if you don't have confidence in yourself. It really doesn't matter what your coach thinks. If he's confident you're going to do well, your parents, anybody in your family, It's what you think about yourself. And how do you build that confidence? Well, there's several ways you can do it, but to me, the three most important ways to build confidence are: number one, trust. Trust in your coach and trust in your workout plan or your strategy. And it's not just swimming. You have to have the whole plan of all 5 disciplines in place and trust that they're going to lead to something really, really great. You have to believe in that system. The second thing is that you have to perform at some point, either in practice or in test meets, to prove to yourself that, yeah, I can do this. I can make those goal times. None of us are magicians. We're not going to pull a rabbit out of the hat at the end of the season and suddenly swim like Katie Ledecky or Michael Phelps or Caleb Dressel. If we didn't show that we could do that at some point in that season, we have to, this is reality. We can swim above our heads. We can do that. But we also have a limit to how fast we can go based on our physical preparation and our abilities, our natural abilities. But occasionally in practice, you need to have that great set that says, I can do this. I know I can do it. I just did an amazing set today. That just gave me confidence I'm going to be able to do it. It doesn't hurt if you do it in some practice meets, dual meets or test meets leading up to the championship meet. But it isn't essential that you do that, because most of those meets you're tired. You're not going to necessarily be feeling strong and swim fast in those meets. Sometimes you do, but most of the times you don't. But if you do have a good swim in a test meet leading up to championship meet, that also can give you confidence. But the third way that I think maybe is more important than anything else is, and I say this because it's really true, is that you got to really have the right attitude and believe in yourself. So what I tell every swimmer to do, especially during the championship meet, get up in the morning, do your stretching, go in the bathroom, do your thing, look at yourself in the mirror and smile. Smile, yeah, smile. Because this is supposed to be fun for you. This is what you worked hard for, and you need to be ready for it. And you have to enjoy this moment. It's not supposed to be drudgery. You're not supposed to be so nervous you become petrified on the block. All those things are harmful. You have to be a little bit nervous. That's normal. But you also have to enjoy this moment, because this is what you've worked so hard for. So it starts with a smile. You smile, look at yourself in the mirror, you nod your head and you say, I got this, I can do this. And that's the way you start your day, every day during that meet. And so that third way, in believing in yourself and smiling, really paints the whole picture for your meet. It really sets the foundation of how you're going to swim in that meet. And so believe in yourself. And be confident that you can do it. You've put in that work, you've stuck with the plan, you've done your visualization, you've set your goals. Now be confident that you can achieve those goals. And when I say stick with the plan, that doesn't mean necessarily you have to make every practice. Sometimes you're better off missing practices or backing off and doing a recovery practice when you don't have it, when you're too tired. But believe in your coach and stick with the plan through the championship all the way. The fourth part of mental training we call focus, and there's really 2 parts of focus in my opinion. One is the focus that you have during an entire season. By the way, we don't call them seasons at the race club, we call them chapters. Every swimmer is writing the book of their life as they live it, and every season is a different chapter. So when we finish a season, we say, okay, we're going to close the chapter on that book of your life, and we're going to start a new one. And we don't go back and reread it. We learn from it, we glean from it, and we move on. But we don't have a rear view mirror. We look forward always to the next chapter. And how can we make this chapter end well? So the focus has to be there throughout the whole chapter. You can't lose your focus on training or your plan for a week or 2 and suddenly get back on track and have it end well. Usually you have to stay within reason of sticking with what you intend to do to get ready to swim fast. And if you do that, usually it'll work. Usually it's successful. Not always, but usually it's successful. The second part of focus is at the meet itself. And it's so easy when you go to a championship meet to get distracted. There's a lot of people there, perhaps a strange pool, one that hopefully you've looked at least online to become familiar with. But it's a different environment, and it's a little bit of a nervous environment. You're not used to that. And there's a lot of noise, there's music, there's people, there's friends, there's a lot of distractions. You have to stay in that moment. You're there on business. This is the meet that really counts for you. This is the meet that you want to swim well, that you've trained all season for, and you don't want anything to stand in your way. At least of not, you know, some social friends that come up and start talking to you and distract you when you're really there to try to swim fast. So we say go to that championship meet. Don't be antisocial, but don't become chatty Cathy either. Have fun, smile, get your warm-up in, get there early, avoid unnecessary stress. Do your warm-up the way you're going to do it, and then put a towel over your head, sit with your team, cheer for your teammates, but focus on you. Focus on what you're there for, and be ready to do your job, because that's where you want to perform. At the end of a swimmer's career, I don't think they should be judged on how many world records they broke or Olympic medals they broke, or you know how many, whether they made the Olympic trials or not. It's really how well did each swimmer perform in his or her championship meet, chapter after chapter throughout their career. I can name a few swimmers: Phelps, Mike Burton, probably Katie Ledecky, and a few others. Every championship meet they performed at the highest level of their capabilities. And some, even Phelps or Mark Spitz or others, didn't always perform great at every championship meet, but most of them did. That's what really determines a champion. That's what, in my opinion, it determines a great swimmer who can become a great human being in whatever endeavor they're going to do. So the fifth part of the mental training, which is probably, I don't know if it's the most important, but it's sort of the final step in the whole process. And if you don't do it, all the other four don't work as well. And we call it anchoring. We think of anchors, what do we think of? Well, we think of some big piece of heavy metal that you throw over a boat that keeps the boat stable so it doesn't get blown away. It stabilizes the boat in that position. Or you think of an anchor as the last person of a relay who's, you know, the fastest person they put in last to try to win the race, to anchor that relay. But this anchoring is a little different. This is anchoring your mind and solidifying your mind in those 5 steps of mental training to become the toughest, highest killer instinct swimmer you can become. And what is it? Well, it's something you get to create. It's kind of the fun part of this whole process. This 5th step, be creative. Think of something you can do or say or think right on the block or right before you get on the block for your race. And there have been some famous anchors through history. I mean, think of Michael Phelps standing on the block doing what everybody thought was his dynamic stretch. Well, it was, but it was also his anchor. And he did that, I think, from the time he was 10 years old. I look at old videos of him, he's doing it when he was young. That not only anchored him, but he was so loud, he slapped his shoulders and his hands together. He would make everyone aware in that whole natatorium that he was about to jump into the water, and you better beware. So it had a dual effect. My son was quite famous for his boxing routine that he would do. And it distracted people. I mean, they weren't used to that, but he shadow boxed before he'd get on the block. Without doing that, he wouldn't have been as fast. He wouldn't have won the Olympics if he didn't wear that robe, that famous red, white, and blue Rocky Balboa robe that he wore up to the blocks in the Olympics in 2004 and won the gold medal. So that was part of his anchor, and he needed it in order to win. Usain Bolt, remember, to the world, that famous, you know, thing that he would do with his hands up and his finger. And every time he did that, the rest of the runners in that race he would strike fear in them, because they'd look over and see him do it and knew that, oh boy, you know, I'm running for second place. But have your anchor, you know, have it, create it, think about it. It doesn't have to be the same every season or chapter. You can change it, but don't forget to do it. And that's the last step in this process. Once you do that, you get on that block. Don't overthink the race. you think of one thought. You get one thought per stroke. If it's an IM, you can actually think of 4 different thoughts for each stroke. But the rest of those races, you really think of one thing. And that one thought about your technique is going to bring your whole race together. Maybe it's your head position, it's your recovery, the aggressiveness of your arm recovery to the water, your pulling motion, your breathing pattern, whatever it is, it's going to draw it all together. But don't try to think of 2 things or 3 things. You just pick one. Get up, smile, enjoy yourself, and swim fast. So that's our 5 steps of mental training, and I'll repeat them again for you. 1 is setting your goals, specifically writing them down. 2 is visualization, twice a week for 15 minutes throughout the entire season, every night the week before the final championship meet. 3rd is confidence building. Do that by swimming fast in practice, sticking with the plan, and then occasionally maybe swimming good in one of your test meets to lead you to believe that you can do it. You're capable, physically capable of making those goals. And then, of course, smiling, believing in yourself, looking at yourself in the mirror, say, dang it, I'm good. I am really good. Again, it doesn't matter if your coach tells you that or believes that, or your parents. You got to believe it yourself. The 4th is focus, and that's just sticking with the plan. Don't get distracted. Things happen. Sometimes you get sidetracked a little bit, but get right back on track. Don't stay off track for a week or 2 or 3 and expect to reach your goal times. You got to get right back on track when things happen and stay with the plan. When you get to the meet, put your blinders on. It's like Tiger Woods on the green when you just would see that ball go right in the cup. You got to focus on the end of the pool, your lane, and not see anything else but where you're swimming. And then the last thing is anchor. Have fun. Create something fun, different. It doesn't have to be visible. It doesn't have to be like Phelps or Gary Jr. or Usain Bolt or Michael Jordan, who had his anchor before every free throw. He would do the same routine every time. You get to create your own, and it doesn't have to be so obvious like that. You can say something to yourself, you can think something, it could be a prayer, it could be a thought, it could be just okay, we can take some questions. I hope that you will consider mental training to be an important part of your coaching or your swimming if you're an athlete, and that you focus on those 2 15-minute visualizations through the season and do all 5 steps, because it will lead you to become a better swimmer, or if you're coaching, it'll lead your swimmers to become better and have better results at the end of the season. We have a few questions, one in Spanish, so I'm going to read this to you in Spanish from Maria Tarazona. Buenas tardes. Qué importante es la preparación mental en el deporte. It's just more of a statement, I think, from Maria. She recognizes how important the mental preparation is in the sport of swimming. And we agree, Maria. Estamos de acuerdo. It's one of the most important aspects, not just in swimming, but any sport. And you really have to consider it as such. That's why we take the visualization very seriously and recognize the importance of doing it. It actually can enhance your results of your swimmers tenfold. And I say that not, exaggerating. It just makes them better swimmers. They're going to swim closer to that perfect race by visualizing. When I was a physician in Phoenix, I used to have to play in charity golf tournaments a couple times a year because I had my favorite charities and they always had a golf tournament. And I never practiced, and I wasn't a very good golfer. But what I would do is I'd take, the clubs out a day or two before the tournament, take out a 7-iron or whatever, and I would just swing that without even hitting a golf ball. I'd just swing it on my grass in the backyard. And I would visualize hitting the ball, perfectly straight, 170 yards down the fairway. And I never even hit a ball, but I just took every club in my hand and I visualized myself hitting the ball well. Then I'd go out and play in the tournament, And surprisingly, I played almost as well as if I'd been practicing every day. And all I did was visualize. So if I didn't do that, and then there were a few times that I either forgot or I didn't, I mean, I would slice, I would miss the ball, I was terrible. I mean, horrible. So the visualization is powerful if you use it. Here's a question from, whoops, no, not a question.
That's basically all we had.
Okay, I guess that's it. So everybody seems to be tuned into mental training, and you know, I don't know how else I can explain to you how important this is, but I hope that you will incorporate those 5 steps into your coaching routine and into your swimmer's routine. And don't wait till the end of the season. Start at the beginning of the season with setting the goals, and then from there, you know, work on all aspects: the visualization, confidence building, focus, keep them on track. A lot of times we have to adjust. You know, things aren't working out the way we expected. Again, Mike Bottom, great coach at changing up on the fly. He would alter things. In fact, he writes his practice down every day, but he never does the practice he writes down. He always adjusts it in the middle of practice. And so I feel that's an important thing to do in the season as well. If your swimmer is not swimming well, they're beaten up, or they're just extremely tired, they're getting discouraged, rest them a few days. Let them start swimming faster in practice. Way more important than missing a couple of days of hard work. They have to swim fast. And I know this, especially with sprinters, they love to swim fast in practice particularly. So you have to enable them to do that. You have to give them the opportunity to do that. Here's another question. Ricardo Prado, great IMer from Brazil, once said at the '84 Olympics, he who endures the most pain wins. You know, that's an interesting point. I mean, you got to be able to endure a lot of pain if you're going to be swimming really well at any level. And you know, it hurts. And sometimes it's the great swimmers that can push themselves through that pain barrier, not just in the races, but in the meet, in practices, that end up being the most physically conditioned athletes. But that doesn't always determine the winner. And I think it's going back to what Spitz said, and that it's 97% mental. I'm not sure I believe that. But the mental component, when you're standing up on the block, really determines in many instances the outcome of the race. Sometimes there's just somebody who's so much better, it doesn't matter. He can have a bad day, or she can have a bad day and still win. Not very often. Most of the time it's who believes the most in themselves, who's the mentally toughest, and who hates to lose the most. That often is, you know, what it boils down to. It's not about I want to win, it's I don't want to lose. And that's really the determining factor. So I kind of look at that as being more important than everybody wants to win, but how badly do you want to prevent yourself from losing? How badly do you want to race? How badly do you want to beat the person in the lane next to you? And that's a mental component. And like I said, you can enable your body to swim way above its level, or you can swim at your level, or you can swim below your level. It just depends on what your mind decides to do with you at that moment. What do you do for someone who has low confidence? Well, that's a great question, because I see that all the time. One thing I would start with is you got to tell every swimmer, because it's true. You're not lying when you tell every swimmer that they're good, because everybody's good at something. They may not be good at everything, or they may not be good at a lot of things, but there always is something that they're good at in the sport. And maybe they're not going to become a world record holder. That isn't what I mean. I'm just telling you they are good or better than others at certain things. And you tell them that. Maybe it's pulling or kicking or starts or turns or whatever it is, or just technique, that they have a better technique than anybody. You got to tell them how good they are, because they need to hear it. And they don't hear it enough from their coach, often from their parents. They need to tell them themselves, but they also need to hear it from others. So I would start with that, is tell someone, you know, you may not be great at everything in here, but you are amazing at this. And point it out to them and tell them how good they are. And then tell them, yeah, you can get better in the other things, but right now you are just killing it on your breaststroke. And I love your breaststroke. It is so amazing what you're doing. Very few people can do what you do. Or you've got this amazing set of tools for butterfly. You've got the shoulder flexibility out the kazoo. Very few people have that. Let's play on that. Let's build that. Let's turn you into a great flyer. Okay, it takes a great kick to be a great flyer. We'll build that. But right now, you've got these amazing tools. And, you know, I measure the tools anatomically of every athlete who comes to us from 0 to 10. 10 being the most flexible or the strongest. And we're measuring core strength as well as flexibility. And, you know, almost everybody has an 8 or a 9 or 10 in some area. Not in every, very few have that in every area. There are a few that do, but very few. Most of the time they have great flexibility and great tools for either free fly back or breaststroke. Very few have both sets of tools. They're very different tools. But the point is, when they have those tools, tell them you got the amazing tools to kick fast. You just don't have the strength. You haven't done enough kicking. We need to work on your biomechanics. But man, you've got this ankle flexibility out the kazoo. You can become an amazing kicker. If you don't have that ankle flexibility, not going to happen. So tell them what they're good at, the good things they have, and build on that. Over time, if you tell them enough, they'll start to believe it. And coaches don't do that enough. They don't tell their swimmers how great they are. Every single swimmer, male or female, any age in your practice, is great at something. Find it, tell them, let them know about it, and pat them on the back. Pat them on the back and just say, you know what, you're awesome. You are awesome. We just don't do it enough. So I'd start with that. That's a great way to start building their self-esteem and their confidence. If someone's prone to comparing themselves to others, you know, which can be hard on self-esteem, how do you prevent that? I think you have to, again, talk to the swimmers and tell them that every individual is different. They can't compare themselves with others. They may be better in some categories, not as good in others, but everybody's good at something. I wrote a book during COVID. It's called Winning Life's Gold Medal. In fact, I hope you all read it. It's only 150 pages. It's not long. And maybe the first chapter of that book, which is we can all win a gold medal in something, is maybe the most profound chapter that I wrote, the most important one, because it's true. Every human being born on this earth has some talent for something. You just have to figure out what it is and help them nurture it and develop it. Nobody's born with the ability to win a gold medal in any stroke, but they develop it if they have enough talent and if they have the will to do it. But it may not be swimming. It may be something else that they're talented in. But even within the sport of swimming, there are so many different options. There are so many different categories. There are so many different opportunities to be good at some aspect of them. And you have to find those and you have to build them. Doesn't mean that, you know, a 50 swimmer only swims a 50. It may mean that, you know, as they get older and they get more focused, that becomes their primary event. You don't want to have a 10-year-old who only swims 50s and doesn't learn how to do the other strokes or the other, you know, distances. But you do have to find their talent and nurture the talent. I mean, you're not going to take a fast twitch person and turn them into a great 1500 swimmer. It's just not going to happen, nor vice versa. But you can figure out where they're good and help them build their talent in the area where they've been blessed, where they've been given that talent. And just try not to let them compare themselves with others. I mean, because I remember the very first nationals I went to. I was 16 years old, 15, almost 16 years old, and swam one event, 400 IM, barely made it. I think I made it by a tenth of a second. And I went to the meet, and I'm watching this guy named Mark Spitz swim the very first day, and he breaks 50 seconds in the 100 fly for the very first time. This was back in 1967. That tells you how old I am. But it was an amazing accomplishment. That was a long time ago. Today, the women go 48, but then 49 for a guy was pretty fast. So that night I dreamt that I was Mark Spitz. So the next day I'm swimming the 400 IM, and what did I do? I go out in the first 100 faster than I've ever swum 100 fly before. Now I can tell you here that I'm lucky I survived that race. The last 100 didn't look very good. In fact, the meet manager had to come out and pull me out of the pool by my suit, and the pool was spinning around. I was like 5 seconds slower than my best time. It hurt badly, but it was just a poorly swum race because I was thinking I was somebody else. I forgot who I was. You got to swim in the body that you were given, and you can swim above your capabilities, but you can't become somebody else. You got to be you. Okay. Breath holding for underwaters. How much improvement comes from physical condition versus mental confidence? Well, there is a lot of mental, psychological impact on a swimmer's ability to breath hold. And I know that because I've had friends down in the Keys who took spearfishing lessons from a guy up in Fort Lauderdale. And when we spearfished together, they couldn't stay down for more than 30 seconds, and they had to come up, and they were gasping for air. They went to this course, and it was all about the mental training and learning to relax the body and how to breathe. And within one day, they could hold their breath for 3 minutes. Now, they didn't change physically in one day. They just changed mentally in one day to be able to do that. And I think the same is true in a 50 sprint. You can talk yourself into believing that you can swim that 50 sprint without a breath. Now, you're not going to do that if you're 10 years old. It's not going to happen. But if you're 16, 17, 18, you can probably swim that 50 without a breath. All you have to do is convince yourself. I've never seen anybody die in 20 or 30 seconds without breathing, even it may be painful at the end of it. But there is a tremendous mental overlay in the breath holding in a sprint. And it turns out it's really important because the more breaths you take, usually the worse you're going to sprint. And it has an impact both on your stroke rate and your frontal drag. So mind over matter. You believe and will yourself to get to the wall without a breath. I mean, who can go 1 up, 1 down, 100 fly like Caleb does at the elite level and hold their last 8 strokes into the wall, fly without a breath? Or in freestyle, the last 13 strokes into the wall without a breath. From 15 meters out, he's like boom, 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 all the way into the wall without a breath. He doesn't do that, and Chalmers wins a gold medal. He does that, and he wins, and that's exactly what happened. So it's mind over matter and practicing it, but there is a tremendous psychological component to holding your breath. No question about that. What do I mean by talent? Well, that's a good question. What is talent? I mean, talent is an innate natural ability to perform well at something, but no one becomes great even with talent without a lot of hard work. I don't care if we're talking sports or business or academics, it doesn't matter. Talent only gets you so far. So everybody has different levels of talent, even within the sport of swimming. Different breaststroke talent than butterfly talent, kicking talent versus pulling talent. You have to figure out, again, how much talent do they have, and where is that line? Where is that talent focused with them? Not that you want to ignore the rest of it. You do have to focus on what they're good at, and you want to help them get better at that. But sometimes you have to focus on what they're not so good at and developing that as well. If you want to be an IMer today, breaststrokers own the IM. There's no question about that. But if they're not good in the fly, in the back, and the free, they're still not going to win. They have to work on their weaker strokes in order to become great at the IM. And frankly, the elite IMers today don't have a weak stroke. They're strong in all 4 events, and that's what it takes to be great in that event. So, recognize talent, understand where it is, realize that it's not the most important thing that they become the greatest swimmer in the world or make the Olympics. It's just letting them achieve their goals. No, not letting them, enabling them to achieve their goals. That's what you have to do. Enable them to do that. And that's, again, the 5 disciplines that are required in order to get them to swim up at their highest level. Jack Palmer asks, some people are naturally great swimmers, great physical condition. Swimming is crazy because talent can come from anywhere. Yeah, and it's different in swimming. I mean, talent is hard to define in the sport of swimming because it's not the usual normal situation. You get guys that become huge and big and strong, and they become a detriment to themselves by causing so much drag from the bulk of their bodies, and they get in their own way. It doesn't demand the most physically strongest person. It demands a person that utilizes their body the best in the best way, connecting the parts, coupling, as we say, to go fast. Timing of their sport is so critical. Not many people talk about timing in the sport of swimming, but it's extremely important, as it is in almost every other sport. Baseball, football, golf, tennis. The timing of every part of the swing or the throw, it's all so critical, and the same is true of swimming. I just look at a VM a few minutes before the show, and it was showing an older swimmer, and her freestyle was just off. I see it all the time in breaststroke, but usually in freestyle it's pretty close, but she was just off. Her shoulder rotation was happening when her hand was almost completed the pull, which was way too late. So she wasn't really connecting or coupling the way she could to go fast. And if I didn't have the VM study to show that, I wouldn't be able to recognize it. But it was very obvious to me in the VM, looking at the data, looking at the peak velocities, and watching her hand and realizing the middle of her pull, she just let go. She just let go. And then she would push out the end, couple with that, and get her peak at the end, which is not typical. But the point is that, the timing was really off on her stroke. So, the swimming is a crazy sport like that. It's not that. It's one of the few where you want to destabilize a joint, or you take it, subluxate it in order to go faster. In almost every other sport, you want to keep the joint strong and stable. But in swimming, we pull our shoulder out of the socket. We take our hips to the farthest rotation that they can possibly go. And our ankles, we push to the extreme in terms of both directions, breaststroke one way, freestyle the other. So it's an interesting sport. Max Headroom says, that's kind of my issue. My son loves a 50, but it's like pulling teeth to try to get him to do mid-distance. His coach and I try to explain to him, but we have no luck. Well, there's an old saying, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And in the end, your son gets to determine, you can try to point him in the right direction. I'll give you a great example. Gary Jr., my oldest son, had a beautiful technique, beautiful freestyle. And for years, everybody said, Gary, your best event would be the 200 free. I don't really want the 200 free. I don't want to swim the 200 free. I want to swim the 50 and the 100. You're not big enough. You're not strong enough. You're not fast enough. You don't have enough vertical. You can't do that. You got to swim the 200. I don't want to swim the 200. I want to swim the 50 and the 100. So what does he do? He goes out and becomes the fastest 50 and 200 or 100 guy in the world because he wanted to do it. He decided that's what he wanted to do, and he built his weak. He didn't have a great start, but by the end of his career, he could hold his own with anybody on the start. So he fixed it. His kick was always good, but he didn't have the upper body strength, so he fixed it. He went out and worked on it and got stronger. Your son might be right. Maybe it is the 50 that he wants to swim, and it may take him a while to get there, but don't try to force them into something that they don't want to do. In the end, if they don't want to do it, it doesn't matter because they're not going to do it, and you can try to push them in there, and they're going to resist, and they're not going to be happy. And if they're not happy, they're not going to swim well. So, a lot of people love to swim the 50, but don't have that kind of talent. And maybe he's in that category. But if that's the event that makes him love the sport, then help him build a better 50 so that he can become better at it. And it may take time, but that's my response. And if he doesn't become the fastest 50 in the world, so what? But if he enjoys it because that's the event he loves, then that's all he needs. So. All right, take one or two more questions and we'll call it here. The 200 free was the mentally toughest for me growing up. This is from Jack Palmer. 200's a tough event. So is the 100. I have to tell you, everybody thinks the 100's a sprint. It's not a sprint. 100 is an amazingly tough race. It's gosh, they're all tough in different ways. But yeah, I wouldn't argue with you that the 200 free is maybe one of the toughest, if the toughest event. I always thought the 400 IM was the most painful event, more so than the 1500, where you could just grind it out. It was kind of gnawing pain, but the 400 IM pain was like, oof, over the top pain, especially at the end, at the finishing the race. Anyway, that's one 400 IM. 400 IMer's biased opinion about where the pain is worse. Nick Tan, become competent. Only way to acquire a well-deserved high self-esteem is to earn it. You're right. You have to earn it. You can't hide or pretend like something great has happened when it didn't. It's relative, and I always say greatness occurs when you achieve your goals, whatever those are. It doesn't matter how fast or slow. If you achieve your goals, and they were made aggressively, I like to say aggressively, you put them out there so they're not easy to achieve, but you get to them, then man, you deserve to be congratulated, and you need a pat on the back, and you be told you're amazing, because that's what life is about. It's about achieving those goals. And I think the relative level of ability is almost irrelevant in this sport. That's why, think about this, only 0.1% of all the swimmers that ever enter the sport have any chance of making an Olympic team. And it's 0.001% that have a chance of winning a gold medal. So why is it that the other 99.99% of swimmers that don't achieve that love the sport? Is because there's so much more to it than just winning the gold medal or going to the Olympics or the World Championships or breaking world records. If that were all that we had to offer, man, it wouldn't be a great sport. But it is, and it's a lifelong sport. And people love it because they learn great lessons from the sport. People are great in the sport. It's a healthy sport. That's all I can say. Maybe the best of all of them. Anand says, my current kick time is 50 for 50 meters, yards, doesn't matter. Do you think I can drop it to 30 in 2 years? Wow, that's a big challenge, but maybe. I would say don't take the drop from 50 to 30, take the drop from 50 to 45 and say, I want to get there in 6 months. And then take the drop from 45 to 40 in 6 more months. And then from 40 to 35 in 6 more months. And then, take it one step at a time. Maybe not even 6 months. It might take you a year to drop that much time. It's okay. But set a plan in place for you to drop within reason. You can't go from 50 to 30 probably in 2 years. It might take longer than that. But is it possible? Yeah, it's definitely possible. Pre-race routines, what sort of things have you seen that help mental confidence? You name it, Jack. I mean, anything that the swimmer wants to do, as long as they do something that they know is their anchor. That's all I have to do. Most swimmers are shy. They're not going to be as boisterous or flamboyant as my son and do the shadow boxing, kiss their biceps. But that's what he did. And if he didn't do that, he wouldn't swim as fast. So just have them do whatever they're comfortable with, but as long as they do something. And they need to know what that is, and they need to do it. So those are important things. I recall hearing an interview from Gary Jr. many years ago, which he said something along the lines, I've never swum a race I didn't think I'd win. What do you think helped him reach that point? I don't know, that's the way he was. I will say this about him. He never swam a race in season that I think he thought he would win, and he never swam a championship race that he thought he would lose. And that's the truth. When he swam in season, he was the worst swimmer in the pool, and he didn't care. For him, it was just get up and swim. It was practice. And frankly, if he didn't put any credence or importance on the race, then he didn't swim fast, and he didn't. But at championship meet, he always knew he was going to win. I mean, that was just him. He was so full of confidence. And he believed in himself. Nobody would stop him. And pretty much most of the time he did. He was either there or really, really close to winning. But that's just the way he was. That's the way he was built. And mentally, he was one of those guys that was, 9 or 10 out of 10, probably 10 out of 10. There are a few that I can name who swam great in every championship meet of their entire career, and he was one of them. Even when things weren't perfect, he would still swim great because he believed. One more question. The PE instructor at Georgia Tech said that by the end of the course, everyone here is going to do 50 yards underwater, and everyone did, and some could hardly swim. There you go. Mind over matter. If you talk yourself into believing that you're going to be able to swim that 50 without a breath, you will, or with one breath or two, whatever it is. But if you say, I'm not sure how many breaths I'm going to need, you're going to take 4 or 5, and you probably feel like you need more than that. Mind over matter. You got to believe in yourself. Don't let anybody stand in your way, and never, ever back down. When you're standing on that block, be like Gary Jr. Say, I got this. I'm going to win this race. Nobody's going to stop me from winning. All right. Thank you all for your attention. It's been great. I hope you enjoyed the show. We look forward to 2 weeks. It'll be after the New Year's, and Coach Thomas and I will be back with another live YouTube broadcast. In the meantime, join our channel if you can. Go to the top of the page on the YouTube, hit the join button. You'll get some free videos from us that are great videos that Richard, my son, produces. They're all based on technique, or some of them are actually on dry land and training, but you'll get one of those every month. And we'll see you back after the first of the year. Have a very blessed and safe and happy Christmas and New Year's, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.